Tape Deck Media.
My friend Dan, he's got a podcast, cause all comics need a podcast, and nobody had a podcast called The Art of Bombing. So Dan went out and bought a tape deck. Who knows why he bought a tape deck? Now podcasts don't get played on tape decks, but Dan is from the 80s. So hey there, all you funny jerks, come talk to Dan about your work. Tell him all about your worst times. It's The Art of Bombing. Welcome to a brand new episode of The Art of Bombing presents Between Bombs Callbacks, where Larry and myself, Dan, call back the most recent episode. And in this episode, we are calling back episode 309 with Taylor Ruddle, all the way from New Zealand. It has been a long time. In fact, I'm not even sure, thinking about it off the top of my head, if we've had an international comedian on this podcast yet. I feel like we probably have because, we have over 300 episodes, but off the top of my head, I can't say for sure. So this might be the first international interview.
I think it might be. I'm sorry. I'm sitting here thinking,
Yeah,
racking
trying
my
to
brain
figure
through
this
the.
out.
Yeah. I mean, I know we have. Yeah, you've had comics on that have done shows internationally, but they're
Yes,
not. But they're based here in the States. So yeah,
exactly.
this may be the first one. I did like you getting to learn things. Like people from New Zealand are referred to as Kiwis. I
Yeah. I got to learn a lot. And this is, if you haven't listened to that episode yet, this is a good opportunity for you to go back, listen to that episode, and maybe you'll learn something too.
you know what? We'll wait for you. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. Okay, now that you've listened to the episode, yeah, I hope you learned as much as I did because it was a learning experience. Because it was interesting too, like the different, obviously there was that them being called Kiwis and different, there are other different things about just stand up in general and how, kind of the approach there versus
Yeah.
over here.
Yeah, a lot of interesting idiosyncrasies that I wouldn't think, would be that different, but it sounded to me though when he was describing some of the audiences, like the New Zealand audiences, I'm like, that's just like rural America.
I know,
Yeah,
right? Yep,
yeah.
yep.
It's just
Rural
like
America.
it's just rural America, just the guys that are sitting there like, well, I mean, you're funny, but I ain't gonna laugh at you because I don't want you to think I want to kiss. Just the things.
I don't want to laugh at you because I don't want you to think I want to kiss.
Yeah.
That sums up rural America. Just
That is exactly the where you see like you'll when you get like one of those dudes that's sitting there with his arms crossed, but then all of a sudden he gives you a and that's you're like that's as good as it's gonna get today.
good
That's
as it's gonna get.
thanks, Daryl.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, well, like I said, it was a good conversation that we had. It was great to have him and I have been talking about having him on the podcast for a while. Scheduling is a little hard because obviously he's in New Zealand. He's like I want to say like 19 hours ahead or something like that. So when we recorded here, I think we recorded it was evening here and it was like midday there. So this is also the first episode we've recorded from the future.
Why didn't you get lottery numbers, Dan? Dan, come on.
Right? I should have been like,
Yeah.
hey, I should have got some intel on some betting.
Yeah, exactly. What's wrong with you? Dude,
We
pull up Biff Tannen.
we could have turned this podcast into a money-making machine
Yeah.
opposed to the losing money machine. But but it was great to finally have him on. He's also got a great podcast that you should check out called Riddle Me This, and he does a lot of other fun stuff. He is part of the Tape Deck Media family as well, so his podcast is on our network as well. But that wasn't why we had him on. It wasn't like to do a cross promotion because if you listen to the episode, we barely talk about it. We talk about comedy because that's what this podcast is all about. It just happens to be a happy coincidence. But one of the things that we talked about that he brought up, which I thought was really good, and it's a really good mindset, just not just for comedy, but in life in general, and that's leading with curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, well, when he said that, I was like, oh, that's real Ted Lasso. Because that's from the show,
Yep.
be curious, not judgmental. And I dug the, because, dealing with that heckler, and I say heckler, I don't know how to describe that, because that person was juiced and pilled out of their brain. And, that leads
Yeah.
to
Oh,
some
absolutely.
silliness.
But at the same time, like, that when it comes to hecklers, if you look at like, because there's a lot of crowd work clips out now, it's becoming a popular subject just in comedy because it's part of, it's become part of the social norm. Yeah, I'm two thumbs down. Larry and Dan and Larry give crowd work clips two thumbs down. Uh, but we're the Siskel and Ebert of comedy
Yeah,
clips.
yeah.
Uh,
Both of us are dead. That's
yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, we look like it, but
yeah.
we both look like ghosts.
I just look like I've been fished out of a river.
uh, but when it comes to like when it comes to dealing with hecklers, that and just when you see these crowd work clips where that's what they're doing is they're dealing with a heckler. After he said that, it kind of clicked for me that I was like, wow, the better ones are the ones where they are actually genuinely leading with curiosity because then whatever happens, it ends up happening more organic than coming off forced. Whereas
You
if
know.
you ask the crowd, what do you do for a living? Are you two together? And, that whole, all the hacky questions that comedians try to do to provoke crowd work.
Well, and if you lead with curiosity, that can save you, because I've had days where I'm on stage and I've heard someone vocalize multiple times.
Yep.
And initially when I first started, I thought my correct reaction was to come at them hard, be like, "Yeah, what are you doing? You stupid
Yeah,
idiot."
you get mad right away. You want to
Uh,
get mad that's the
yeah.
because it's
And
frustrating when you're on stage.
the last few times that's happened, I've looked out and it's been an audience member with some obvious condition, where that's just how they kind of are enjoying the show, by repeating things loudly or by making an audible noise that is similar to laughter. Um,
I have
but
a perfect example of this.
okay.
I have a perfect example of this. I did a show, I think it was last December, um, at this distillery, and I was the headlining comedian. And while I was up on stage, or up performing, a guy came in that was running a food truck outside of the venue. And he just starts talking to the bartender and then like I assume the manager, but was talking really, really loud. And of course, his back was to me because he's facing the people towards the bar. So like he wasn't paying attention to what I was doing and he was talking really loud. And so, I kind of made jokes about it and I tried to get his attention and like the bartenders and the managers could hear and they were kind of like trying to figure it out, like trying to keep the situation, on the level, if you will. But then it ended up turning out the guy just kept talking and kept talking really loud. And then finally, when he realized what was happening, it turned out he was deaf and he couldn't hear me. And he reads lips, and that's why he didn't
Oh,
know that
and if
I was
if you'd went
interacting.
after him, you'd have been a monster. Yep.
Oh, absolutely. And I did it in a playful way. Like I was kind of going after him, but I wasn't being mean about it. I was trying to be silly and fun about it. And then when it came out that he was deaf, and I was like, well, I guess I'm an asshole now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I did a
And then
show.
I brought it on. I put it back on myself. We're like, well, no, I'm a jerk. So
Yeah. Oh, I yelled at the deaf guy. He's not going to hear it anyway.
yep, yep, exactly. I'm over here berating a deaf guy from stage. I'm the villain. I
Yeah.
understand.
I'm the monster. Yeah. We I did a show where I had it was a group of college age high functioning kids on the spectrum. And their chaperone is one of their professors, because it was like a class about, I don't know if there was a class about comedy, where it was like they were doing a section about comedy writing, but they sat in the back of the room, and some of them, how they enjoyed the and I we found out before it even started, so it was like, all right, thanks for the heads up, cool to know. But initially, I didn't. We what we really discovered was that yeah, they enjoy that by repeating the line that you just said,
Hmm.
and that's it's echolalia. It's what happens in especially when their guards down and they're not masking, and it's this really. But initially, I was like, it hits you like, what are you doing? And then I was like, before I could do that, I was like, you're gonna be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. Don't be a jerk. This group of humans is just here, and I could see them. They're having a blast, and I'm like, right, you gotta be cool about it. Just calm down and be cool. Just
Yep.
let this happen
It's
today.
just gotta happen. So that's good advice, leading with curiosity. And that's, like I said, going just good life advice, when you're in having human interactions with other people. We often forget we don't know what other people are going through. We just assume everybody is happy and life is great, but that's not always
Right.
the case. And you just gotta, be more empathetic. I think when you're, leading with curiosity is an empathetic approach to,
Yeah.
getting to know people and and doing, and even doing crowd work, you're being more
Well,
empathetic to the situation because you
and
just never know.
we've said multiple times, good comedy comes from empathy, not cruelty.
Exactly, exactly. And another thing that we talked about in this episode was finding inspiration outside of stand-up. And I know I've talked about this before. In fact, I just did last week. I did like a little, I'd say, I guess, for lack of better terms, a blog, but it was really a Facebook post that I shared multiple places about doing. It was comedy advice from somebody who's been producing and doing comedy for a long time. And the tip was about submission videos. Anyway, to make a long story even longer, people have reached out, said they really like the tip that and the advice that I put in there. And so I'm going to start doing tips regularly. And the next tip that I'm actually going to do, and this is before I realized this was going to be one of our subjects today, is that this is one of the things I want to talk about is finding inspiration outside of stand up, but it's also the tip is going to be, it's okay to take a break. And
Yes.
this is one of the reasons why, because you go do other experiences and then that'll help you find things to write about.
Yep. I've talked about that on here. We've talked about
Hmm.
it texting. We've talked about it on the phone, where it
Yep.
is you can as much as you and I love stand up, and as much as you might love performing stand up, I have I've burnt myself out multiple
Yeah,
times, and
absolutely.
to the point where you have looked at me or said to me, or I just knew and been like, "Hey, take a break, take a
Yeah.
break."
Yep. Take a break. It's okay to take a break.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like tonight, because I've been gone most weekends recently. Tonight is my night to do laundry and just
Just
recharge at
decompress.
home.
Yeah, absolutely. And you had a busy weekend. You were traveling
Yeah.
for comedy this last weekend, and and then
The two
you've got to
prior
get.
weekends and the weekend before that, I think. I mean, it's
Okay,
been
you don't have to rub it in, buddy. We know you're doing great up in Chicago. Okay, all
yeah.
right, just
If
keep
I was
rubbing
doing
it.
great
I'm
in
such a great
Chicago, I'd be doing
comedy.
spots in Chicago. I'm doing great on the road. I'm doing
Well, oh, I'm doing the road.
oh, I'm just
Way to fit that into the conversation.
although I would like to thank Brian Hicks at Zany's Comedy Club here in Chicago for giving me a spot this a
How
week ago.
Not to get too far off topic, but how did that go?
It was, I will say, and you know me, I'm very picky about how I
Yep.
do, and I'm
Oh
very
yeah,
honest, but I
absolutely.
had a very good set. I will say
That's great.
it was a
Congratulations.
very, very good set, and I had a lot of fun. And I think I made a good enough impression that they'll not not have me back.
Not have you back. Yeah, and if you're wondering, obviously, if you're listening to this week, you know we didn't release an episode last week because this was supposed to come out last week, but
Yeah,
Larry just got too busy to produce the,
I did.
that
I honestly,
yeah, he did. He got too busy, and sometimes life happens, and that's the thing about us too. That's, it goes into the being empathetic. Sometimes you got to let people they got to have their time to do the thing. So I don't, we didn't, I'm not apologizing that we didn't do an episode. I'm just letting you all know why. And it was a good reason not to release an episode. But going back to what we were talking about, finding inspiration outside of stand-up, I think it's important and to go experience life. This is something that I've been trying to do I'm getting older. I'm going to be 47 this year, and I've been trying to do experiences, not just for the comedy, but just for things that I want to do. But I've found that I'm actually writing more now because I'm doing these experiences. Like,
Mhm.
I give a couple examples. I love punk rock, ska. I started going to more festivals. I wrote jokes about, being the old guy at the festivals. I went to a nude hot springs. I got a bunch of material out of going to that. So not just doing things for life experience, but doing things that might make you uncomfortable. Because if you're uncomfortable doing things, you're going to be more on alert and you're really going to be trying to observe things because you're being cautious. And it's going to stem for great comedy.
Like for me, it's going to restaurants with cloth napkins. That makes me very uncomfortable.
That's why his wife doesn't take him out in public that often.
And not that often. Does it require a collar and buttons? Ugh, it's gotta
She's like,
okay.
nope, nope, we can't do
No,
that.
we'll send Coco away. We'll pick him up later.
Yeah. But I want to add to that though. Don't just do things to try to get comedy out of them.
Right.
Like that's the
Fine.
that's the difference. You need to find stuff that you actually want to do and go
Yeah.
experience. And then that comedy, even if it's something you've always wanted to do and you've been afraid to do it, and that's why it's uncomfortable, the comedy is going to come organically.
Yeah.
You're going to get stuff organically, and then it's going to be better.
Yeah. Well, and that's yeah, don't force it. Don't go for the specific purpose of I'm gonna get a bit out of this.
Yeah.
Because if you force a bit out of it, it's not gonna be great.
Yeah.
Um,
Yep. I mean,
I mean,
it might be, but the chances very, very slim. I would say, yeah, I mean, always do things for the bit, but realistically, do them for the experience and something that for
yeah,
you, do it for you because you want to, not because you're trying to write stand up, but definitely find inspiration outside of stand up. And I've said this a million
yeah.
times on this podcast and just to other comedians. We talk about burnout. We talk about, like I said, it's okay to take a break. And one thing I've found, the comics that say, they're like, oh, if you're not doing comedy every day of the week and you're not grinding, you're not out there, you're not going to be successful. Full of shit. Okay. Full of shit because those comics end up being the least successful because then all their comedy starts becoming inside baseball. They become what we call a comics comic. They're making the back of the room laugh, and that's not going to get you booked on a paying show. Maybe you'll get a couple gigs, but as soon as people see you playing to the back of the room where comedians probably aren't going to be anyway, you're not you're not going to make that crowd laugh, and then you're not
Yeah.
going to get booked because that's what I see. They start talking about their jokes become about stand up, and the average person doesn't know the lifestyle of a stand up comedian. Like they don't get these jokes, and so you become unrelatable to a regular audience,
If
and that makes
you
you hard to book.
yeah, if you watch some of your favorite stand-ups, like if they have that very successful first album or first special that comes out, they're gonna get booked. They're gonna be on the road all the time. So potentially the next album is going to be talking about being on the road or
Yep.
travel or
You see
being on an
that a lot.
airplane.
You see
Yeah.
that a lot. Yes,
And
you
I mean,
do.
because that's what we
That's a
write
good
about.
that's a good example. Yeah, it goes back to we write about what we know. We write about
Yeah.
our experiences.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I've
that's
been working on bits about, crazy things that have been happening on the train to me, it just,
yeah.
and because that's where I'm riding the L. I'm doing
Yep.
stuff here in the city. So
And
these
we're not
things come
saying
up.
don't write about that stuff. You just got to
Right.
make sure it's relatable to the average person.
Yeah.
You can't, if you
Yeah,
go too far inside baseball, you're not going to be relatable to your
yeah,
audience, you know? And in a situation like yours, like Larry, like what you're talking about, writing on the train and everything, that's going to be relatable to people in Chicago who ride on the train. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Like that's stuff that even though it's somewhat comedy related because you're using the trains to travel through the city to do sets and this and that, it's still everybody uses the train to go to places, so it's
yeah.
still going to be relatable.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah. Well, we should probably start wrapping up. Last weekend, you did some fundraising shows. You were traveling this last weekend. Talk about that a little bit, and because we're gonna share the
Yeah.
GoFundMe down in the show notes. But tell people a little bit about what's going on there.
Sure. Well, a buddy of ours, Hayden Hamilton, came up in Central Illinois scene, St. Louis and Champaign, Springfield, Bloomington, that area, and then went to Emerson College for comedy writing, and came out and was like, all right, well, my next step is LA. So he moves to LA and starts like making some really good headway. And was walking home Easter Sunday, and somebody blew a light and hit him with a car, and he ended up in a hospital. Well, he's still in the hospital. He finally was released this past week to an acute rehab center, but he's got a long, long road ahead of him. And so last weekend, a bunch of us went to our home club. So a lot of us had moved away. We all came back, as many of us as we could, and did 2 nights of fundraising for him. But yeah, when we it was as successful as we could make it, and which was pretty successful. Uh, but like Dan pointed out, there is a GoFundMe, and it's a long road, because
Absolutely. And if you know anything about, I mean, if you're probably a comedian listening to this, health insurance is far and few between for us comedians. So
yeah,
there's
yeah,
going to be a lot of medical bills, there's going to be a lot of, recovery, so on and so forth. And, if you have a little extra to give, anything helps.
yep. Anything, truly, anything helps. So, yeah, if you can, we appreciate it. And just let you know what, if you do donate, and if you don't want to put your name on there, anonymous is fine. But if you do put your name, just put something like fellow comic, and that would mean the absolute world to that dude. To know that the comedy community, whether he
Whether he
that
knows you or
reaches
not.
far and wide,
Absolutely.
is there to support him. So
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Do the things, follow, like, share all our content. Make sure if you're not, join the Facebook group. It's called the Art of Bombing Bomb Squad. We're trying to get, we're not just trying to use it for promotion. We're trying to get conversations started
yeah,
and talk about different things about comedy related. So join the Facebook group. If you want to support financially, go buy some swag and then wear that swag at the open mics and tell your friends about it. Because what we really want is for people to listen to our podcast. That's what we want.
yeah.
So the best way to do that is to spread the word. Spread the word by wearing swag or just telling your friends about the podcast. And finally, if you wouldn't mind, head over to wherever you can leave a review. I believe Apple, and I think you can leave reviews now on Spotify. Leave us a 5-star review rating and then leave a review and tell us in the review what we'd like to see is for you to tell us what your favorite episode has been. Who's your favorite guest that we've had? I mean, we've had over 300, so there's a lot to choose. Granted, we have had some repeats, so maybe it's right around 300. But either way, tell us who your favorite guest has been. And until next week, keep grinding.
Stay on that grind, everybody.
This has been a Tape Deck Media production. Thank you for listening.